Good morning, everyone. They say that the truth will set you free. So the question is, if the truth will set you free, why don't people tell the truth more often? And we find in this week's parsha the story of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were naked in the garden, and the Torah says they were not ashamed until they ate from the tree. What does this mean, they were naked and not ashamed? It doesn't only mean physically naked. Just like people wear clothing to conceal their bodies, people wear psychological clothing to conceal their souls. Sometimes we're afraid to reveal our true identity, our true essence, our true character, because we're ashamed of who we are, perhaps, and we feel that people will judge us negatively or not love us as much. And therefore we wear clothing to cover things up. The idea of the innocence and the purity in the Garden of Eden is they were able to be completely open, honest, transparent, and never be ashamed. However, the truth will set you free, because when you're able to be honest with yourself and with others and be transparent and be vulnerable, and people can see you for who you are and then truly love you for who you are, not for some facade or some imitation or pretend of who you really are. There's a fascinating medrash associated with the creation of the world. In the beginning of this week's parsha, it says that God consulted with the angels. He said, "Let us make man," which our rabbis say consulted with the angels. And the Talmud says there was a debate in heaven between four angels whether or not God should make man. The Talmud says first the angel of kindness stood up and said, "Yeah, you should create man, because man by nature is kind." But then the angel of truth stood up and said, "No, do not make man, because man is full of lies, deceit." And then the Talmud says the angel of righteousness said, "You should make man, because man by nature is righteous, does acts of righteousness." But then the angel of peace stood up and said, "No, you should not make man, because man is full of quarrels and conflict." So you had truth and peace saying, "Do not make man," because they're full of lies and conflict. And kindness and righteousness say you should make man. So it was a 2-2 tie vote. So what does God do? So it says in the Medrash that God took truth and threw it down on the earth, and now it was 2-1, and God created man. And it's a very obscure Medrash, and the question is, what's the meaning of the Medrash? And one of the interpretations of the Medrash is perhaps that God said that truth is something you're going to have to toil for. It's not going to be like a heavenly gift that it comes naturally to man. Just like you have to seek out things in the earth, like diamonds or water or minerals, you have to dig, but that's why it's so precious, because you have to uncover it. So too, truth is something that's not going to be easily found. You're going to have to dig and search and have courts of justice to determine what is true and what is false. And we know that in this week's parsha alone, two people are confronted, and they don't exactly tell the truth. They're not exactly forthcoming. After Adam and Eve eat from the garden, God comes to Adam and says, "Why did you eat from this tree?" And he says, "The woman made me eat it." Then he comes to the woman, the snake, right? Not exactly honest and transparent. And when Cain murders his brother Hevel, God comes to him and says, "Where's your brother?" And he says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" He doesn't say, "Yes, I murdered him." Man by nature is always a lying being, unfortunately. There are studies that show that we lie more often. Now sometimes they're white lies, sometimes they're borderline lies, like, "Oh, I didn't get your email, it was in my spam or something." And sometimes they're outright lies. But human beings have a proclivity towards lying. That's what the Talmud is saying. However, we have to struggle to uncover our own truth and to be truthful and honest, because we can only set ourselves free if we learn to be honest. It's a fascinating idea that says, Bereshit bara Elokim eight hashamayim v'ta'aretz. Bereshit bara Elokim eight. In the beginning, God created 8. What's 8? Aleph and Taf, the first and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Meaning, first God created the alphabet, because it was through language that God created the world. And the Talmud says something very interesting. Truth and falsehood is a 3-letter word in Hebrew. The word for emet is, truth is emet. Falsehood is sheker. The Talmud makes 2 interesting observations. Emet, Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Mem is the middle letter. Taf is the last letter. So the Talmud says emet has to be consistent from the beginning to the middle to the end. Second observation the Talmud makes is that to find emet is very difficult, because the letters are spread out. The first, the last, and the middle letter. It's not readily available or accessible or found. The third thing the Talmud says about truth is that each one of those 3 letters have 2 legs, Aleph, Mem, and Taf. So the Talmud says, truth has legs, which means it stands the test of time. As opposed to sheker, the Talmud says, each one of those 3 letters has 1 leg, meaning sooner or later it crumbles, it falls on its face. Sheker is 3 consecutive letters in the Hebrew alphabet, which means it's easy to find falsehood. And third of all, it's not consistent. It doesn't pass the test of time. It doesn't hold up. So we live in a world where truth is fraught and challenged. And it's precisely because it's so challenged, that's why it's so valuable when we discover it. And that's why our life has to be the pursuit of truth. And that's why every time we talk about the Torah, we say Torah emet, the Torah of truth. There's a story told about a great rabbi from last generation. His name was Rabbi Silver. He was once in a court as a character witness, and the lawyer said to him, is it true that you're a great rabbi? He said, I'm one of the greatest rabbis alive. He says, is it true you're a great Talmudist? He says, I'm most probably the greatest Talmudist alive. And the judge turned to him and says, Rabbi, is there anything in your religion that talks about humility? And he says, Your Honor, there is, but I'm under oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The fact that when we make someone take an oath, we say, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, tells us there's various degrees of truth. Sometimes you're telling the truth, but it's not the whole truth. Sometimes you're telling the truth, but it's not nothing but the truth. So it's a struggle. It's a constant effort. And from the beginning of time, God knew that man is going to be challenged in that area. But perhaps because it's such a struggle, therefore it could bear the greatest fruit when we learn to be truthful with ourselves and with others, and to be honest and vulnerable. And today's a day that hundreds of millions of Americans are saying, who's telling the truth? Because they both can't be telling the truth. So we may never know who's telling the truth, but it's a time to look into ourselves and say, am I being truthful with myself, with my loved ones, with God, with others? Because ultimately there's nothing more valuable and precious than living with the truth.